All right, all right. So, okay. Let me hear your levels, Darius.
Testing 1 2 3. Testing 1 2 3. Testing 1 2 3.
Okay, I'm going to try my best to get to you by 6:10, but I need you
All
out
right.
by 6:15, okay?
Gotcha.
All right, hon. I might do a little banter, but it will be light. 'Cause I need to get someone else in for like 10, 12 minutes. Okay?
Okay.
Thank you,
Mm-hmm.
sweetie. Appreciate you. When does Dasha go away to school?
Next Friday.
Are you serious? Are you taking her?
Yep, we're flying.
Oh, wow. Ooh, boy, I remember when you all were getting married. Unbelievable.
No,
Ooh. How's Deborah doing? Because I know that's got to be a lot for her.
we'll talk about that later.
Oh, okay. Oh, you know what? It's hard. It's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard, to be fair. It's hard. It's hard. It's hard. It's hard. We'll talk about it. But it's a challenge. And I don't have children, but oh boy.
I know, but you could relate.
Well, you know, it's a lot. It's a lot. But I'm so glad for Dasha. Yeah, we just have to keep her encouraged. We have to keep her encouraged. Okay, okay, everybody. We're going to be talking about Rob Blagojevich today. Yes.
35 seconds.
Okay, so I cannot wait to talk with you about that. I can't wait to get your thoughts. Call me, call me, call me.
Thanks to a grant from Band Deodorant, both the men and women singles would take home $25,000. Despite the progress at the U.S. Open, it wouldn't be until 1984 that the Australian Open would execute equal pay, followed by the French Open in 2006, and finally Wimbledon in 2007. This has been a WCPT moment in labor. We are fighting for your rights.
This is WCPT 820, where facts matter.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. Yes, we can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show, coming to you from WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, at AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. Thursday, August 5th, 2021. It's a joy to be with you today. We're going to be talking about Rod Blagojevich, evictions, and the latest on COVID-19. The latest. J&J is not going to be administered at CVS. Can't wait to hear from Dr. Deborah Verholden about that. And then we're seeing Pfizer has some eye inflammation. I read a lot of information about these vaccines coming out of Israel, the Jerusalem Post, and different newspapers there because they're so vaccinated and they do a lot of scientific research. So it's been really interesting watching this all roll out, just not domestically, but reading papers from around the world. I'm Santita Jackson. It's a joy to be with you. Please call me or text me at 773 WCPT, 773-763-9278. If you want to text me, GWC Injury Lawyers gives you the opportunity to do that. But I want to hear your voices today. What do you think about Rod Blagojevich, the former Governor Rod Blagojevich? Should he be allowed to run for office again? He's paid his debt to society, right? I think that he should, but I want to know what you think. And should some legislators who've been elected to office themselves make that decision? Shouldn't you make that decision? Call me 773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT. Let's get to some of these headlines, everybody. Chicago's going to be mostly sunny. 85 degrees will be our high. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 84 degrees, scattered thunderstorms. The Dow closed down 323 points yesterday. The NASDAQ closed up 19 points. That's Standard & Poor's 500 closed down 20 points. In baseball, the Twins, well, they fell to Cincinnati, just barely. Cincinnati 6, the Twins 5. Chicago, the Chicago Cubs 3, the Rockies 2, and the Royals 9, and the White Sox 1. Are you watching the Olympics, everybody? Exciting, they're setting world records. It's just really interesting. I mean, sports that you wouldn't really pay attention to. Shot put, all of that. You see the tremendous skill and dedication that these athletes put into refining their skills, and then it finally pays off for them. I mean, many, many, many different ways at the Olympics. Well, guess who is leading the medal count? The United States, followed by China, and then Japan, and then Great Britain, and well, actually, excuse me, then Russia, then Great Britain, but leading the gold medal count, China, 33, the United States, 27, Japan, 21. So for me, if that's important to you, something to think about, everybody. They've got a lot of great athletes all over the world, everybody. Efforts to get more Americans vaccinated against COVID-19 are growing more urgent as an expert, according to CNN, warns that if vaccination rates don't increase, the dangerous Delta variant could continue to evolve. Wow. So, what do you think about that, everybody? In the meantime, the World Health Organization is calling for a halt to COVID-19 booster shots to tackle the shortfall in the developing world. Now, remember, initially they said the United States, when you get 20%, you should stop getting vaccines until the rest of the world catches up to 20%. Well, now the wealthy countries, European primary countries, are really moving toward 50% vaccination, if not more. And the global south, if you will, the African continent, India, and on and on and on, they're hovering somewhere around 1%. What do you think about that, everybody? 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. And what about therapeutics? If you get COVID-19, what do you do? What do you take, everybody? CVS is no longer administering J&J shots in many locations. Wow. The drugstore chain, CVS Health, is no longer offering J&J their COVID-19 vaccine in many of its retail locations, according to this report in The Hill. In an email, CVS spokesman Michael DeAngelis said retail locations continue to offer either Moderna or Pfizer, but not J&J. Why is that? That was the one-shot deal, and a lot of people held a lot of hope for that. And San Francisco, interestingly enough, will let people who got the J&J vaccine get a supplemental mRNA vaccine dose. Are they speaking to efficacy, effectiveness? What's going on with the J&J dose? Don't you want to know? I know I do. In the meantime, Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, is going to announce mandatory vaccine policy for all active duty military, and New York City is launching a vaccine passport. In Los Angeles, they're thinking about it. How is that going to work out, everybody? In the meantime, according to the Jerusalem Post, Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine is linked to rare cases of eye inflammation. Everybody. And guess what? Mexico has filed a lawsuit against 11 American gun manufacturers over firearms that flow from the United States across the border and into criminal hands in Mexico. Pastor Darius Brooks, the great Darius Brooks, a great singer, songwriter, producer, psalmist. He's also a pastor, and we just love him so much. So glad that he's with us every Thursday, giving us some good news. The pastor of, what is it? Is it Grace Central? I love
Grace
that church.
Central Church.
I love that church.
Illinois, Grace Central. Yes, sir.
I love it. I love it. I love it. So what is that? Haven't I been there before? I love it. I love it. And it's such a loving church community. I urge you to go. And you all are celebrating God in person, are you not?
And we are, and every time somebody comes to the church to Santita, they say, wow, the church is beautiful. But more than that, the spirit of the church is what people enjoy. Santita, everywhere we go, we got to pay attention to not just the building, but there's an ambience, there's a spirit in the places we go. And when we go into the doors, even residents, our friends, our family, when we go into these places and we pay attention to just walking in the door with the heart that God gave us, if we're not careful, we can sense everything going on in there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What's the good news today?
Yeah, well, that's definitely what we're going to talk about today. The good news today is Proverbs 4:21. It says, do not let them out of your sight. Of course, he's talking about God's word. From Genesis, Revelation, when we rightly divide God's word, everything is so much in there. I'm a lamp unto your feet. I'm a light unto your pathway. No weapon formed against you shall prosper. I can do all things through Christ that strengthens me. May in all these things we are more than a conquerors. When thy mother and thy father forsake you, then the Lord shall take you up. Santita, it is so much of the word of God that can direct us in our everyday lives. When we sick, I'm a doctor in the sick room, a lawyer in the courtroom. He's direction. He says, so when it comes to the word of God, he says, don't you let them out of your mouth. Studying God's word for direction. When we in his word, we got direction. And with the most craziest stuff, it's kind of sort of like in this mess, with Christ, we can have a message. Santita, God won't put no more on us than we can bear. That's not true. Actually, Santita, often God does put more on us than we can bear. That's what that scripture is really saying, because when we need to mature and when we need to be directed by him, the hardest thing is not to look at it from our perspective, but to see his perspective. And often that's where the hard thing is, for us to take that hard thing and use it so he can keep us in perfect peace. Proverbs 4:21 says, do not let my word get out of your sight. The quiet verse evokes the image of someone, Santita, leaning their head forward, turning to hear carefully. The verse continues that the thing with an expression that's understood in my culture and in my language and all over the world, don't let this out of your sight. People of God, this implies something valuable or easily missed or both. Given that godly wisdom is worth more than anything in this world, it's worth paying close attention to, not just listening to it going in one ear and out the other, but really putting it in your heart that he will lead you. It's something to be cherished. It's something to be really paid attention to. Believers ought to give more than just mental assent to God's word. We must lodge in it with our hearts and love it to the degree and to the core that we can do anything when we put our hearts and minds to it with the direction that God gives us. I might not sin against you. The same psalmist also declared, oh, how I love your law. It is my meditation all the day. That's Psalms 119:97, Santita. If we love God's word, we will mold it over in our thoughts throughout the day, throughout the day. It's 6:15, Santita, throughout the day, applying it in each situation and areas that arises in our lives. And even the more, Santita, our hearts and what we say we believe must welcome that God's word, watch this, welcomes us to the degree
Dr. Deb's on the line.
Of a lie in context of what he told us. I'm not a man. I do not lie. So, Santita, we have to let the word of God really get in us and dwell in us richly, as Colossians 3:16 say. Let the word dwell means to live at home as a permanent resident. So when God's word is a permanent resident, if he can get us from where we are to where we deserve to be, he can get us to trust him and forever see that he's our source. And he says, do not let this get out of your sight or out of your heart. My prayer is that God become everything you need him to be for you and to you, so that every promise you say you desire, he will keep his word to you.
Amen. I love it. Pastor Darius Brooks. Yes, that Darius Brooks of Your Will is What's Best for Me. We love him so much. Grace Central. I urge you to go there on Sunday morning. You'll be blessed. You will be blessed. What a wonderful, wonderful feeling service, and great music too. Hey, that always helps. Love you so much. I love his baby, Dasha. He and Deborah's baby, First Lady Deborah's baby, Dasha, is on her way to college. We're so proud of this young lady. What a beautiful young lady she's grown up to be. And independent,
She got accepted
brilliant.
in the honors college, right?
Absolutely. Look, come on.
Okay, good.
Can she help it? Mother. I love Jerry Brooks, and I love her. I know her daddy too. Wonderful parents and a wonderful, splendid first family example to their church. Thank you, Darius. Thank you. Thank you. I love you
I
so
love
much.
you. Thank you so much.
We've
What you
got,
got?
no, absolutely. We've got Dr. Deborah Holden. Uh, she is really one of the world's leading scientists, a world-renowned epidemiologist, got her PhD from, and don't get tired of saying this because it doesn't happen every day. Got her PhD at 24 from Johns Hopkins, full scholarship. And she has taken all of these stellar credentials and she brings them back into the community where we need them the most, to us every day. And a lot of people prevail upon her, but she makes a space to be with us every single day. We have some questions for you. Before we get to this Commonwealth Fund study that shows year after year that out of the high income countries, we're the only ones without a national health plan, without a universal single payer. And we rank dead last in health outcomes. We're seeing that just very quickly, J&J vaccine, they're having some challenges. Now, CVS is no longer going to distribute them. Is there anything we should read into that? Because we've seen some issues that have come out with J&J's vaccine. Or have they just decided not to do it?
I haven't really looked this up, but what I can say is we have a lot of choice now. We have a lot of choice and a lot of options because remember when the vaccine first came out, we only had one. And people were chomping at the bit to get it. And then when the second one came out and we started to get out of scarcity and supply started to match the demand, that was a different scenario. And now we're in a space where supply exceeds demand. So now people can be choosy. And pharmacies can be choosy too. So I'll do a little bit more research into it to see if it was a risk mitigation or just good old-fashioned choice and a supply issue. Because, we know we're wasting vaccine right now.
Well, certainly they produced it and the people don't want it, but they're not passing it around to the rest of the world, to people who do want it. That having been said, what about this Commonwealth study? Every year, the Commonwealth Fund ranks high-income nations. Well, they look at the healthcare and healthcare outcomes all over the world. And consistently, this year, the richest country on earth, and pound for pound, person for person, that is what the United States is, even with poverty and homelessness, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You just have a lot of very wealthy people up top and too many poor people in the middle and at the bottom. We're at the bottom with healthcare outcomes. What does this Commonwealth study, what is it telling us? And why are we at the bottom, Dr. Deb?
Well, we spend a whole lot of money on healthcare, and it's not wise spending. It's not wise spending. And the wealth inequality makes it sort of throws the whole thing out of balance. Because, while we're the wealthiest nation, we also have the biggest gap. Lots of other really wealthy nations, the whole population experiences some degree of that wealth. That is not how it is here. Wealth is not evenly distributed. It never has been. And so what happens is, we spend a lot of money on healthcare. We don't invest a lot in prevention. And then people end up getting very expensive healthcare because we aren't doing as good of a job with preventive care. And so inequality is actually costing us. And I always tell people there's a real business case to be made for equity. If we could stop people from getting health care or getting the lion's share of their health care in the emergency department, it would be transformative. You know how expensive the emergency department is relative to a primary care visit? It's like night and day. But we don't approach it that way. And so the people who are uninsured and underinsured oftentimes are waiting until they're in some kind of acute crisis to get care because they can afford it. And then when that happens, the cost of that care is much more expensive. So it's interesting because you say all the time, universal single payer healthcare system, health and access to affordable quality healthcare should be a right. But very much people here experience it like a privilege.
But Dr. Deb, hold on. Because what we saw during the pandemic that, our dear friend, Pastor Tisha Williams, said, COVID has been a snitch. It told all our little secrets, right? We saw for-profit hospitals in some of the poorest communities in the United States, rural communities among them. They started closing them just as the pandemic was amping up. I said, how can this even be legal? How can you close a hospital that serves the underserved? Because Dr. Knighton brought this up. I love having you all on every day because, my gosh, you give us so much information. We've got more than 330 million people in the United States, but 1 million hospital beds. Does that sound right? I mean, I don't doubt her information. What I'm asking is, should we not be building more hospitals like the Chinese build more airports and they put up hospitals in days? I mean, you know, help me. It seems like we're not prepared for a tough time.
No, we're not. And unfortunately, a lot of hospitals closed, especially the smaller ones, and a lot of smaller practices closed. You know, all of these things, a few of these machines are money. And without that money coming in, they can't keep the lights on. And it's unfortunate because rural hospitals already, many of them are small. They serve a very small but important population. You know, rural health is a big area, and our brothers and sisters in rural communities, their lives are just as valuable as ours are. But those hospitals are designed to meet those needs, and many of them are barely financially solvent as is. So if you go into a mode where they're seeing, 20-30% of their patient load, most hospitals will close. Our hospital here, they said they were losing $350,000 a day.
Now, is that in Baltimore or Flint?
After Flint, and we have with the it's in existence by city charter, Hurley Medical Center, and it is a community-owned hospital. So the city owns the hospital. And they were just bleeding money. Just bleeding money. You got to remember, we weren't doing primary care. We weren't doing prevention. They weren't doing basic procedures. Life-saving surgeries were happening, and most things got converted to treat COVID. And even the COVID treatment, you can only treat people with what you have. We were rationing ventilators and all of that. And so I literally talked to a woman who delivered during COVID, and she was unwilling to have that baby at the hospital. So she hired a midwife, bought a little, one of these birthing pools, and had her baby at home.
But isn't the maternal mortality rate in the United States, particularly for Black women, it's really at the levels of the so-called global South? I mean, I've got 2 minutes left, really under 2 minutes. What is the answer? Because the Commonwealth Fund says, you know what, America, you're dead last in healthcare rankings, and your health insurance system does not provide enough protections for people anyway. The last 90 seconds belong to you. How do we get out of this?
Well, there's a couple of things. So we've got to deal with what has us be such an inequitable nation in the first place. Because the reality of it is health care is not our problem. Health is our problem. And health stems from things outside of individual behaviors and choices. People are living in very stressful and toxic environments. Kids are being raised in environments that are not health promoting, where they don't have access to high quality, healthy food, where they don't have safe places to play outdoors. We have this phenomenon called weather race, and that's what's happening under the skin as you externally face stress and trauma in just daily living. And we know that Black and brown people weather faster oftentimes than our wealthier or whiter counterparts because of the toxicity in the environment and the toxicity of being Black and brown in America. There's a great study that was done, and basically the punchline was, if you're going to be poor, it's better to be poor and white than it is to be poor and Black. So it's like there's these intersectionalities between race and income and neighborhood and all of these things. Those are the drivers, the real structural drivers of health. And those are the things that increase this need for so much health care. you can't even imagine how many communities don't even have sidewalks. When you're a kid, like, where are you supposed to ride your bike in the middle of the street? And we know communities without sidewalks have much higher rates of pedestrian injuries.
No, you know what? We don't know that. I think we know that
30
anecdotally,
seconds.
but you're the one who gives us this information. And we're going to be talking about that. You and I have had discussions on really moving this conversation forward on health. And we're starting that right now, everybody, moving it forward on health, because there are lots of things that you can do, not just to protect yourself from COVID, but we need to start doing our breast exams again. You need to go get the medical exams that women need. And men need to take care of themselves. We need to look out for our children. We need to figure out what it is. Not figure it out. We need to investigate and get the information that we need to help our children. Let's talk about Rob Blagojevich, everybody. Should he be allowed to run for office in the United States, in Illinois? Back in just a minute.
Driving it home with Patty Vasquez. 5 p.m. on WCPT 820.
Okay, I'm going to have to. Can you bring this down just a bit?
Research, 82%.
Okay, great.
Yes, ma'am.
For tomorrow, because it wasn't really clear today. Okay. Do you have?
Really?
Yeah. Do you have access to a landline?
I do.
Okay.
I have a landline.
Yeah, we need to start using the landline because the distortion is too great. But after I'm going to make a couple of phone calls. So if you can be on the lookout for me after the show, or certainly, could I pass your number along?
Yeah.
Okay. I want to go because that's uppermost on my mind. Okay.
Yeah.
No, honey, not but yeah. Help is on the way. How about that?
Yeah, I got distracted. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's all right. I'm like, come on, girl. We're good. We are good. God is good. Okay. Now, get down. I'll pick you up. It's going to be all right.
Yeah.
Attorney
Okay.
Hoffler's on the line.
Okay. Well, you can say hello to CK, but we're going to let you go, Dr. Deb, so we can free up one of those lines. CK?
Hi, Dr. Deb. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? Are you changing the world one case at a time?
Well, I feel a little freer because I now have transitioned out of president of the NBA. But of course, you stop one thing and other things come up. So I'm still, making sure my voice is heard, and I'm excited about that without having to run an organization every day.
Well, no, she's only chairman of the board of Rainbow Push, so she's effectively Reverend's boss. So go for
Mr.
it,
McKee's
girl.
on the line.
There's that too. That's a labor of love too. These are all labor of love.
You know what? We're gonna have to give Dr. Deb some of our hair. I'll just leave it right there. This is one time I saw this girl get Dr. I said, "Woo, woo."
Well, you have to have it in your toolbox. You have to have it in your toolbox. But you need to be able to get gangster when you need to be able to get gangster.
Oh,
You know what I mean?
I saw it. I just said, "Oh my gosh, Lord have mercy." I said, "Well, there you go, gangster." CK. Boo. I love it. Oh, Dr. Deb, I love you. We're gonna let you go. We got sit down.
Dr. Debbie.
Oh.
Good morning, Dwight.
Deb, you want to take this?
I can listen. Yes, sir. I'll listen.
Okay, great. Because we're talking about Governor Blagojevich, and of course, CK has a relationship not to Governor Blagojevich, but a lot of these cases, and so this is really fascinating. And thank you for answering, girl. I fell asleep last night. I was so tired. So everybody heard from me at about 10 or 11 in your case. I was like, oh gosh, this is terrible. I just,
No, but you never have to worry about that. I'm good.
Miss Jackson?
As long
yes.
as I see the text and that it's 2 a.m.
Girl, I appreciate it.
seconds.
I'm sorry, close to me. I'm sorry. Okay,
I can't get Attorney Patel on the line. I'll
don't
keep
worry about
trying
it.
once the show starts.
We are more than okay. Trust me. We're good. Thank you. But you can keep trying, but we're good.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota and Minneapolis, St. Paul. I want you to call me. 763 WCPT 763-9278. 763-9278. Should Governor Rod Blagojevich, former Illinois Governor Rod Blagojevich, should he be allowed to run for office again? Now, there is a Senate resolution that would stop him from running for office, state or local, after he'd been convicted and served time. But he served the time. He's out. And President Trump pardoned him. Or just, I want to get that straight, CK. And so, he commuted his sentence, he commuted his sentence. So it doesn't undo his convictions, but it got him out of jail before he was 70, which is what he was looking at, everybody. So what do you think about that? I mean, you've got Kwame Kilpatrick, you've got people all over the place who have served some time and who served their people well. Think about Governor Edwards out of Louisiana, who had his run-ins with the law. And even with those run-ins, he was able to serve. Think about Mayor Marion Barry, who hurt only himself. Well, after he came out of prison, he ran for office and he was reelected as mayor overwhelmingly because he had served the people so well. We can just keep on going down the list. When these public servants have been allowed to run for office again, they're able to do so. So you let me know what you think. I want to know what you're thinking, what your thoughts are, everybody. This is not just an Illinois issue. It's something that's happening all over the country. Of course, we've got Dr. D. Dwight McKee, noted social scientist, and of course, Attorney C.K. Hoffler, who's worked with different public servants who have served their time in prison and who are out. Kwame Kilpatrick, Mayor Kwame Kilpatrick of Detroit, Congressman Jesse Jackson Jr. of Illinois, and others. So you've seen these cases, you've seen these issues. What about Governor Blagojevich? Should he be allowed to run? And what is his legal status? Because his sentence was commuted. He wasn't pardoned. I misspoke. But his sentence was commuted. He was able to get out of prison, and now his time has been served. What do you think?
Well, good morning, Santita, and to your great, wonderful guests and to the audience. Well, I think that, in a nutshell, I think he should be allowed to serve again if that is the will of the people. He was convicted, he did serve time, his sentence was commuted. He was allowed to go free. There is a difference between a pardon and a commute.
What is that?
The bottom line is, well, a pardon, there's a school of thought that you can get pardoned and it almost erases, this is a school of thought, erases the underlying crime, because this is for criminal issues. Mm-hmm. The underlying crime, and that somehow you were falsely convicted or wrongly convicted and you get pardoned. And the president has the ability to do that. Some governors have the ability to do that. It depends on the state. But commuting of a sentence is slightly different. It's just saying you don't have to serve any more time. You've already served XYZ. But fundamentally, there's a sense that there's an injustice either in the sentencing guidelines and the sentence that you got or the underlying crime. I think a pardon probably would be stronger, but it doesn't matter. In my humble impression, if you're incarcerated, you want to get out. So whether it's a commute or whether it's a pardon, you'll take it. But fundamentally, there are many, many examples, and I have represented a few, of people who have been convicted for what I would call white-collar crimes, and white-collar crimes as distinguished from street crimes, but they're still considered crimes by U.S. laws, and, for financial misappropriation and things like that versus killing someone, shooting and killing someone. Or sometimes, as in the case you said of Marion Barry, where the damage was to him. It was not to his constituents. He didn't misappropriate any funds. He just, the damage that he did was done to him. And we all saw that live and in living color. Mm-hmm. I was in D.C. in law school at the time. So I say that I do think that people should deserve a second chance. Everybody should deserve a second chance. And when there is legislation or an ordinance that says, or even something that's passed by the legislature that precludes someone from serving in public office again, I think that I'm not in favor of that, because there are many, many people that make mistakes. And when they serve their time or come out, they're stronger, they're better, they've learned more. And we have to remember that this governor was one of the most popular governors. And you're there in Illinois, that Illinois scene. He was very popular. Mm-hmm. He's very popular in minority communities. There are some that said that he was a very good governor on social issues.
Yes.
So when you think about all of that, you think about the good that people do, you think about that trajectory, and then these allegations of wrongdoing. And by the way, he alleges he was not able to present exculpatory evidence. He was not able to present evidence that would have caused him, he believes, either not to be convicted or certainly not to have gotten the sentence that he got. And he was not able to present that evidence. And there was a whole bunch of reasons why a judge would exclude evidence. We saw in the Derek Chauvin case and the O.J. Simpson case, we've seen cases that have been on TV, that it is a judge call. A judge can decide whether evidence is relevant or whether the evidence will come in, whether its probative value is such, meaning does this evidence tend to prove, is what it will prove, does that evidence outweigh the prejudicial effect? That's a lot of times what judges think about. Now, as to people who say, well, he's going to bring some witnesses who themselves have legal problems, that's a different question. That's for a jury, or in the case of a judge, to decide on the weight of the evidence, whether they believe that witness, but you really should be allowed to present your defense. So there are all those kinds of issues circulating, but separate and apart from that, Santita, I believe that he and others should be allowed to serve again if it's the will of the people, because these people are elected by the people. So I think, Santita, that's the bottom line. There are so many cases of what I could say fallen heroes. And when they get back up, they do tremendous things, because after all, the greatness that caused them and their skill set, their acumen, their personalities that caused them to be elected doesn't necessarily disappear. Mm-hmm. They just fall. And, if you're a politician in today's environment, you are watched like a hawk, you follow like a hawk. And I'm not excusing improper conduct. I'm really not. I'm just saying that people deserve a second chance, because, by the way, we've had some presidents that have engaged in conduct much worse. They just never went to jail. I'm not naming any names. And we have a lot of people who, in this country and elsewhere, who have done a lot of things, and they just weren't convicted of it. So I think that we don't need to be hypocritical, and in my humble impression, and give people another chance. That's what this country is built on anyway.
Dwight McKee, your thoughts? I mean, indeed, this is a Senate resolution that would stop him from running. A political maneuver, right? This is not a referendum by the people of the state of Illinois. No, that's not what the people said. Some senators who have been elected themselves got together and said, we're going to block him from running for office. Your thoughts?
Well, I always thought that was a goal in the first place. He was the first guy I've ever seen, politician that I've ever seen, that got arrested for breaking the laws of speculation. He never really did anything.
Remember money before they commit a crime? Isn't that what they said?
He addressed the laws of speculation. He was looking at some options. Politics is the is the policy of quid pro quo. There's almost no American ambassador who's not an ambassador because they donated money to a campaign, to the presidential campaign. It is basically the prerequisite of becoming an ambassador. Everybody from Joseph Kennedy to his granddaughter, Catherine Kennedy. He was ambassador to England. She's a recent ambassador. I think it's Catherine.
Oh, you mean, you're talking about Jacqueline and John Kennedy's daughter. Caroline. Yeah.
Right. Is because they donated a lot of money to presidents. And it is kind of the way of politics, is that when people make a donation, you kind of decide what the reward is going to be. He thought about how to reward some people who had been in his corner, and he was arrested based on the notion of what he could do. He never took any money, never cut a deal. At the same time, there are politicians in the same state, Illinois, who voted on his impeachment, who they themselves has taken millions of dollars. Mike Madigan is one. Ed Burke is another, who have law professions that make their living from taking money from corporations for cutting deals and doing favors. And neither of them have gone to jail. And so you wonder why he became such a focus of government, why he became such a focus of his fellow Congress guys and political guys. And the rumor people always believe is because he was so deferential to the black community. And he invested a lot of resources in the black community. And it seemed like historically that people who had done that from the governor's office, many of them had gone to jail. Quinn was the same thing. It was funny, once Quinn began to pardon black people and let black people who were in jail out for unjust reasons, once he made that a habit and put a memoriam on the death penalty, he went to jail. It was very peculiar that people who had done things in behalf of black people and people of color went to jail. Same situation, your brother who had an outstanding record of doing things for people of color, who had put a whole trade bill in play for Africa to bring them into the economy of the 21st century, who had bought water to those who didn't have water in rural black Illinois, who had put a lot of time in helping black people, all of a sudden, and they started talking about that could become the mayor of Chicago. All of a sudden, they figured out a way how to put him in jail. It's just very strange that people who help black people end up going to jail. Blagojevich is a perfect play in that, and it also looked as if it was selective prosecution, and that the whole goal was to keep him from running from office, which was very peculiar, by the way, is that they made that as part of his impeachment process, that he could never run again.
What do you think, everybody? 773-763-9278, 773-763-9278. I know we're giving you a lot to think about, but this is a lot to think about because this is not a law that will stop Governor Blagojevich from running for office again. This is a Senate resolution. This is a Senate resolution. And yes, I still call him Governor Blagojevich. I received a voicemail. I hope that you're still listening today, sir, because I did not get your name and I didn't get your email because he objected to my calling President Trump. That is a courtesy that you extend to anyone who's held office you refer to them when you meet them in person. If I saw Mayor Marion Barry, I would say, "Hi, Mr. Mayor, how are you?" A friend of mine asked me about that once. If I saw President Carter, I wouldn't say, "Hey, Mr. Carter," I would say, "Mr. President." If I saw President Obama, Mr. President. If I'd seen President Nixon, who had his own legal troubles, he'd be President Nixon, and on and on and on it goes. So that is a courtesy, and that is a tradition to which I hold. Whether I agree with the president or an office holder or not, I respect the office. I respect the office, and in that I will continue in that tradition with all due respect. That having been said, what about this? What about a resolution? I mean, it just CK. This is not even a law. This is just that some
I
senators
know.
got together. Help me.
Well, it's all politically driven. I think Dwight McKee said it best. And I represent at least 3 people who are in this position, and I don't talk about clients. And so when I just don't talk about clients. And so that's why I'm not giving any details or anything like that. But or details of clients, because I always believe that's privilege, even if it's in the public domain. And I've represented some magnificent clients, and each one of them deserves a chance again, because again, they served this country, their communities, audibly. But this is all politically driven. Whenever you see, quote unquote, what they call white collar crime, in the political context, you always have to wonder, because people accept money for their campaigns every single day. Every single day. People talk about public correction. Let me just have an ideological discussion. What are lobbyists? Lobbyists are paid by some entity, a corporation, sometimes government, paid entity to be advocates of interest, to get to the bottom line, to get to some place. They're paid to do that. And they go and they advocate and they do all these things. And, some of them contribute to campaigns and all this kind of stuff on behalf of their clients. So our system is set up, if you want to talk about corruption, our system, some would argue, is set up so that, as long as you register as a lobbyist, then, you're not going to be considered a corrupt individual. And it's just part of the U.S. system. Dwight McKee used the example of being an ambassador. Historically, people who get some of the best ambassadorships are significant donors.
Oh, yeah.
Not like I gave, $20,000. Significant donors, and have been significant donors for a long period of time. It's a plum assignment. Sometimes it does, you do see people who are given ambassadorship based on merit. So I think we don't need to be hypocritical in how we apply the rules. But in this case, where someone has not officially committed a crime in the sense, he was maybe, according to, those who convict him, contemplating, thinking, putting in motion, but hadn't done it. And then you have a resolution that's passed to preclude him. It just seems like many, many forms of injustice. And this is probably a political statement, but even former President Donald Trump said, even he said, well, I think this kind of raggedy. Even he said that. And it's so interesting that he did commute the sentences of not just a former governor, but also former Mayor Kwame Kilpatrick. Yeah. So it's very, very interesting and these are strong Democrats, not just, but strong Democrats who would have been people who would have opposed him vehemently had they not been incarcerated. Let's just be clear. So on some level, people say, forget the politics. This is crazy. And I think there's that sentiment. But putting aside whether he was guilty or innocent, because the pardon, even a pardon or commute, it really is not about the guilt or innocence. But there are some people that feel that the decision maker or whoever gives the pardon feels a little some way about fairness, although it's not supposed to be part of the equation. But, certainly when you have a pardon, you have certain rights that are restored back. And a commuting of a sentence, a lot of times that doesn't happen immediately. So I think it's unfair. I think it's unfair, but I say this across the board. It's not a political, I don't say that in making a political statement. I believe across the board, people should deserve a second chance. It's very interesting how how when it comes to some people, they're like, oh no, they need to bury them. They should never be able to live. They should never be able to get a job. And then other people, you hear the same people say, oh, but give him another chance. After all, what he did wasn't so awful. He wasn't a mass murderer or anything like that. So I'm just in favor of being even-handed, applying the same rules to everyone. It's just for some people, particularly if they help the Black community or Black and brown people, minority groups, the sentence and the ire against them is so severe and strong. And then others who have, served time and everything could almost become president of the United States.
Almost. I mean, look, people drop bombs on folks. They commit war crimes.
Yep.
And they get
Yep.
places of honor in this world. I mean, Dwight McKee,
Right.
the hypocrisy C.K. Hoffler just described is just, it's stunning.
Yes, it is. And who comes to mind are guys like the Dulles brothers, like Allen Dulles and his brother, who became the Secretary of State and the head of the CIA, who is known in history as committed as many atrocities as anybody in the history of the country, who set their own government up, a secret, a private government up, and even in opposition to some positions that the president took, ran these major war crimes all over the world for years, and he has an airport named after him. The airport in Washington is named.
I'm sorry. I meant to mute myself.
The international airport. Woo!
So it depends on who's committing the crimes and in whose behalf they're committing the crimes. It has a lot to do with who you commit your crimes in behalf of and who did you commit your crimes upon. And so when you commit these crimes on poor people or people who don't have the capacity to defend themselves or people who you have the license to victimize because you got the power, then you become a hero. He who gets to go will make the rules.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Santita, I would just add this. The legal framework within which these cases are decided, completely inconsistent. From state to state, in one state you can have the legislature just pass, a concept and it'll be upheld because it's a political issue. In other states, that would be impermissible. So it really, really is so subjective. And it just depends on who's in power, who's in the legislature at that moment. And people are horse trading favors. So it's really unfortunate. Marion Barry, he actually ran from jail. He was such a popular popular mayor. And I credit him for much of the development that we see and we've seen in the District of Columbia over the past 30 years. Marion Barry put in place.
This is his
much
vision.
Of the development in our community.
That's right.
It was his vision.
That's right.
Our community, Marion Barry put in place. Marion Barry helped more lawyers, professional people in the District of Columbia to be successful by implementing policies that equalized, where he was just not interested in people coming and getting business from the District of Columbia when they had no African-American representation in their companies.
Right.
He wasn't interested in window dressing.
And he gave us BET.
He gave us BET and so much more.
The entrepreneurial Black class in Washington was created by Marion Barry. The upper middle class in Washington before Marion Barry were government workers. I'm not mad at anybody. They were doctors and a few lawyers, and the lawyers lived in Baltimore because D.C. was always a very segregated city. There was a wonderful store that we used to know, Garfinkel's. You remember that, CK?
Yeah, I remember Garfinkel's.
It was like Neiman's, okay?
Yep.
Black women could not try on hats in Garfinkel's in the 60s, okay? Washington, D.C., that's the nation's capital. You need to know that. You need to know that. So, very in 30 seconds, CK, they belong to you.
30 seconds. We have to stop the hypocrisy. Just stop the hypocrisy. What applies to one should apply to all. There should not be anything precluding the former governor from being reelected if the people want him to be.
So
he should not. He paid his time, and he's done the time, and his sentence was commuted.
Well, you know, I'm asking everybody, what do you think? What do you think?
30 seconds.
Because so much of what we see, these are political prosecutions. I mean, you might even have an opinion about what's happening in New York with Governor Cuomo. I mean, even though it's a different ball of wax, there's just a lot going on. Do you think Governor Blagojevich should be allowed to run for office again in I was about to say in the United States, in Illinois? Should he? Just anywhere in the United States. What do you think? Call me at 773-763-9278. Santita Jackson Show, back in a minute.
Well, UTIs are the worst.
Hold on one second. Postmate, could you, or Zach, can you bring that down? Thank you so much. CK, what were you saying?
It's going to be interesting to see what happens in New York with Cuomo, because you've got Letitia James, she is a tough sister. She's like Bonnie Willis here in Atlanta. Both of them are both the prosecutors levying charges against President Trump, and they're about the business of prosecuting. And when Letitia James digs in like she has, and puts out a report like she has, I think it's going to be very interesting. There's no question that political forces would be delighted not to have the Cuomo dynasty anywhere. I also feel that maybe, Cuomo may have made some, he may have overstepped. I don't know. If we are to believe what the women said, and he created an environment that was toxic as it relates to sexual harassment, and that's not good. But I think that how he is dealt with in New York is going to be very interesting, because they're going to want him out for good.
Oh, yeah.
And that might be a deal that he strikes. See, it's one thing to strike a deal. That might be a deal that he strikes.
Attorney Patillo is on the line.
The legislature putting in place something. It's going to be very interesting, because they are, the Cuomos are the royalty in New York.
Oh, my gosh.
Political royalty.
But what they don't have right now is their dad, who built this. See, it's one thing to inherit something. And my mother always talks to us about that. She said, no. It's one thing to build it. It's another thing to inherit, because those who inherit, that's the danger of dynasties and why dynasties oftentimes fall. And that's why you've got to appreciate a dynasty that is able to go forward, because there's, the thing is, if you don't put your children out in these streets and help them to build the relationships and learn what you learned, they will lose everything. They'll lose it. So, I mean, I want you all, Robert Patillo, how you doing, Robert?
Well, how are you?
Oh, we have got Dr. D. He loves having you. And, of course, we've got Madam Chairwoman. I love it. CK Hoffler. We're talking politics.
Morgan, how are you, CK? I might need to borrow Dr. D tomorrow morning. I'm doing the morning show on ALK. I got to talk to these people about these vaccines. So I'm going to talk to you, text you later.
I'm not giving you any more guests. I'm telling you. Oh, my goodness. I love it. Of course, you have his number, right?
Yeah, I'm going to text her later.
Oh, okay. I was about to say, because I do share numbers now. I do that.
I'm getting back to Cuomo. It's going to be very, very interesting, because it is looking kind of raggedy for him. I mean, let's just be clear.
Yeah.
It is looking raggedy. If you believe some of it, I do think is politically motivated. Of course it is. But I think, there could not be this kind of report if you didn't give them ammunition. So that's the countervailing factor. I think he's given them ammunition somehow, some way, by his conduct. And there's a distinction between, hugging people we're all, huggy. Well, not all, but I'm a huggy person.
And CK.
But there's between the... Yeah.
CK, I'm sorry. If sex were not currency in politics, I'm not saying that any woman or any man should be in a hostile work environment. But let us not act like sex is not treated like I mean, like everything. It is a form of commerce in politics and in the corporate world. It's okay. You know it's true.
I point again to hypocrisy.
Yeah.
I just, let's just be consistent. And again, I'm not saying that those women don't deserve to be vindicated.
Absolutely.
I'm not saying that because I do believe it's not appropriate. But I think we have to look at the whole system. And we have to think about, the whole system and what people allow some people to do and not other people to do. It should be either disallowed or it should be allowed. And I believe so.
No, I'm just trying to find out what's going on. Oh, okay. I just lost CK.
No, I'm here. I'm on.
Okay. What'd you say, Jewel?
Yeah.
You said he lost his mind asking a rape victim about her sex life and he the boss. I hear you.
Yeah. No, he clearly, got carried away without a question, and I'm not excusing that. But it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Mm-hmm. That's all. I mean, all I'm saying is there's a lot to this. There's a lot more to this story than we're being told. It always is, you guys. It always is. It always is. There's always much, much, much more to the story. So, and at the bottom of the hour, we're going to be talking about these evictions, everybody, with Dr. Max Wolf. So you all, have you ever had Dr. Wolf on your show, CK or Robert?
No, but I would at the test.
We got a minute 15 left.
We're going to focus on my show on Tuesday. Is going to focus on eviction.
Okay.
I'm going to have to. So I would love to connect with him to have him speak because we're going to focus on. There's a big push by lawyers. I think I mentioned this on one of your shows that the legal community, lawyers, pro bono. The efforts are being organized by different bar associations. I was engaged in this before I turned over the mantle to help people who are being evicted and who are poised right now because of what we
35 seconds.
will happen
45, my bad.
to our communities, all of our communities.
Okay. Well, we're gonna.
I would love to connect with him and have him on the show.
You absolutely should.
With somebody.
You should. You should. I'm gonna come I'm coming right to all of you beautiful people. Whew. Good morning, Renee. Good morning, Jewel. Jewel, you should call in. You said they have a certain look. He got a type. Yeah, girl, please. And you got a lot of folks who are ready, willing, and able on all sides. Unfortunately, my mother wouldn't let me be a Senate page. She said that is a den of iniquity up there. This was many, many years ago, CK and Dwight and Robert.
Change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate, to face of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Oh, hey everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show on WCPT, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, AM 950 Radio. My brothers and sisters to the north in Minneapolis, St. Paul, coming to you today on the largest progressive talk radio station in the country, WCPT, and the largest progressive talk network, really. It's housed right here at WCPT and AM 950 Radio. We want to hear from you. I want everybody on the Santita Jackson and Friends page. Renee, Jewel, A. King, everybody, Dave Dowling, my brother to the north, up in Canada. Everybody, Dawn, everybody like and share, like and share, like and share. And please like and subscribe. More and more of you are going over to YouTube to watch on the Santita Jackson Show page. So please, thank you so much for joining over there and for liking and subscribing. It means so much. Your support means so much. And of course, if you want to hear the podcast of the show, go to WCPT820.com/Santita. They pull out all of the commercials and they post it within an hour of the show. So if you want to listen to it, please do that. And please tell more people about the show. When you can. In Chicago, we're going to have a high of 85 degrees today. Mostly sunny. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 84 degrees will be the high. Scattered thunderstorms. The Dow closed down 323 points yesterday. The NASDAQ closed up 19 points. And the S&P 500 closed down 20 points. In baseball, the Twins, they fell to Cincinnati 6, the Twins 5. The Cubs were triumphant over the Rockies 3-2. The White Sox fell to the Royals, though. Wow. Royals 9, White Sox 1. Are you ready, people? Are you watching? Are you watching the Olympics? Well, the United States is way ahead in the medal count. 85, China 3, Japan 43, Russia 55, Great Britain 50. But there's another story. Who's winning the most gold medals? China, everybody. Yep, that's right. 33 to 27, the United States, and 21, Japan. But boy, have these been thrilling games, and they're setting world records. And then people who we expect to compete, they're not competing. People we expect to get into the finals are not getting in the finals. Wow, it is really exciting stuff. It really is. It really is, everybody. More people are getting vaccinated. More people want to get vaccinated, but then there are people who are hesitant. And so there's a great big push, according to the CNN report, for people to get shots in arms. What do you think about that, everybody? The calls are growing more urgent as we're looking at the Delta variant. What do you think about that? What do you think? In the meantime, guess what? CVS is not going to carry the J&J vaccine anymore. No, they will not. According to this Hill report, drugstore chain CVS Health is no longer offering the J&J COVID-19 vaccine in many of their retail locations. The World Health Organization is calling for a halt to COVID-19 booster shots to tackle a shortfall in the developing world. As you know, the global south, the so-called third world, they don't have vaccines, but at one point, Canada had every two vaccines for every Canadian. They have that many. They have that many. Wow. The United States comes in dead last in healthcare rankings of high-income countries, according to the Commonwealth Fund report, everybody. Wow. What do you think about that? In New York City, you're soon going to need a vaccine passport to get around. If you want to go to indoor dining, if you want it to make use of fitness facilities, go to entertainment venues and performances, you will have to show proof of vaccination. What do you think about that? How do you think that's going to impact tourism in New York? The Secretary of Defense, in the meantime, Lloyd Austin, is going to announce mandatory vaccines for all active duty military. What do you think about that? Let's get right to it, everybody. Let's talk about politics. Let's talk about politics. And I want to hear you, everybody. I want to hear all of you. I want to hear what you think about Governor Rod Blagojevich, the former governor of the state of Illinois, who had his sentence commuted by President Trump. And now he is suing to be able to run for office again in the state of Illinois. He said, this is where I live. I'm ready. I've served my time. I'm ready to serve again. What do you think about that? It was a Senate resolution, not a law, just a Senate resolution that is blocking him from the ability to run for office again. What do you think about that? And then Andrew Cuomo, who is facing calls, the governor of New York, is facing calls to resign. It was found that he created a hostile work environment, according to at least 11 women. And the state attorney general, Letitia James, said, our investigation has shown that you are guilty of sexually harassing these women. And so now in the New York State Assembly, all you need is a simple majority. You just need a simple majority in order to be impeached. And if he's impeached, he won't be removed from office, but he would be removed from power, and then he would have to undergo a trial. Many people are talking to him now about leaving. You should resign. He apparently is digging in his heels. So what do you think about that? Should he dig in his heels, and should he have a trial in which he can speak to the charges against him? Should Rod Blagojevich, Governor Rod Blagojevich, should he be allowed to run again? I want to hear from everybody. 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. I mean, after you've served your time, should you be able to resume your life? And if you've been charged with something, should you be allowed to continue your life while you make your case for your innocence? Something to think about. Something to think about. Just think if you were on the other side of that. Attorney C.K. Hoffler, outgoing president of the National Bar Association, the largest and oldest black bar association in the world, more than 65,000 lawyers. Boy, has she had a busy year. And of course, she has her own radio show on WAOK, the iconic talk radio station out of Atlanta, every Tuesday from 10 to 11 Central Standard Time, 11 to 12 Eastern Standard Time. You don't want to miss that. And of course, attorney Robert Patillo, who hosts his own show every weekend, he's going to be on tomorrow morning. I got to grab him before, if I can, just a little bit before he goes on the air. He's going to be on WAOK in the morning, but he will also every Sunday you can catch him and get a really, really great show, everybody, from 1 to 4 Eastern Standard Time, 1 to 4 on WAOK. And of course, brilliant sociologist Dwight McKee, as we're talking politics today. Um, Attorney C.K. Hoffler, I don't even know where to begin here. We just got Attorney Robert Patillo on, so, let's go to him because we haven't heard from you, Attorney Patillo. What do you make of this Senate resolution that is blocking former Illinois Governor Rod Blagojevich from running for office again? And, you can talk about Andrew Cuomo too. Jewel, I'm going to get to you in a hot second. Your thoughts, Robert?
Well, I think we have to stop allowing politicians to use elected office as a jobs program. Rob Blagojevich has been disbarred in the state of Illinois. He probably can't find employment other places. And so it doesn't make sense for it to be the easiest way for you to make money is to go back to grifting the taxpayer. And so when we're talking about the collateral consequences of a conviction, there should not be a special case made for politicians. Until we remove the prohibition or felony disenfranchisement from individuals who have been convicted of crimes or served their times, who now are unable to vote decades later, until we remove the box check system where people have to disclose their criminal convictions in order to get employment, in order to get apartments in some situations, in order to apply for schools. I don't see why there should be a special case made for politicians simply because they're politically well-connected and have somebody who is willing to commute their sentence, not pardon, but commute their sentence. And until we handle the things from the bottom up, I don't see why we go from the top down in order to allow the rich and well-connected to go around and skirt the system when they've already violated the public trust in the way that we saw Rod Blagojevich do it previously. I was in law school when Blagojevich went down. I actually interned for Burl Ellis for a while when he was the temporary senator for the state of Illinois, and it threw the entire state into turmoil. No other work could get done while they were going through the process of working through what Blagojevich had done. I don't see why that's to simply go under the rug and under the carpet so he can find another place to get a paycheck. And then later on violate the public trust again. I think this is the inequities in the system that make people check out of the political system in general.
But Robert, he wasn't convicted of doing anything. He was convicted of maybe thinking about doing something. That was part of the turmoil here. We were all trying to figure out what the blankety blank happened here. Stay right there, Robert. Dwight McKee, why don't you respond to what you're hearing from Robert?
Well, you have to understand that criminality is not a byproduct of good and evil, right and wrong. It's a byproduct of power. It's who has the power to make their vices legal and your vices illegal. And so it really comes down to who's in charge and who's making decisions about what's right and wrong. And that's why I go back to the Dulles brothers, who were implicated in the assassination of 3 presidents, including one U.S. president. And they're all in Princeton's Hall of Fame and have, very high-profile public monuments named after them. It is not good and evil. It is not right and wrong. It is who is in power and who can make these decisions. That's why I say, Robert, that Blagojevich was really only guilty of breaking the laws of speculation. He never actually did anything that was illegal. It was people who was out to get him, who didn't want him as governor because he was more democratic in doling out the resources. They wanted to dominate all of the resources, and the only way they could do that was to get him out of office. And the guy that led the charge on him, which was Quinn, it was always a conflict of interest for him to lead that charge because he was the primary benefactor, a benefit when Blagojevich went to jail and was told not to run again. He became the governor and he led the charge. It was all, I think the whole process was corrupt.
CK, it just seems like this is a very a subjective process, a highly politicized process. It just it doesn't. It's like Dwight is saying. It's like it's not right and wrong. It's it's about he who has the gold makes the rules. Before I go to the caller, CK. And it's like when do you stop? When do you stop paying for? I mean, after you've served your time, ostensibly, at least we're told you've paid your debt to society. Okay. I mean, we see this with what happened in Florida. They paid their debt to society. You got more than 1 million people, 1.4 to 1.5 million who had their voting rights restored, and then people are the power take them. I mean, this is ridiculous.
No, I agree. I think there's hypocrisy everywhere. I go back to the hypocrisy. But I do believe, and this is where I part company with my dear brother Robert Patillo, I do think that he and others across the board deserve a second chance. Whether you're in Florida, you have been a convicted felon, you served your time, you come out, and you should be allowed to vote, and then you have a Republican-driven legislature that says, well, we got to put this little tax on, you got to pay all the fines known to mankind. That is not right either. So I think we need to stop the hypocrisy. But conceptually, I believe, and if I didn't, there would be so many African Americans who would not get a second chance, who would not be able to, who have been wrongfully convicted, who serve time and come out. They should be allowed to have a second chance. And it doesn't matter whether what your color, your creed, your political disposition. So I think the hypocrisy needs to stop, but they should be allowed to be given a chance. And someone should be allowed to launch a defense. So his lawsuit is alleging the unconstitutionality of this resolution. And I do believe it's unconstitutional, but it's not for me to be the final arbiter of that. I think he has a viable claim because there seems to be, again, some imbalance. And it is a travesty to me that throughout the country, when you have elected officials, whether they are Black or not, when they support progressive causes, when they support the people, when they support Black and brown communities and try to put in place programs and equalize, that they are targeted and that ultimately they are brought down. I think that is problematic. Now, that doesn't excuse, you can only be targeted and brought down if you do something that gives people the ability to use the law to bring you down. But we know there are a lot of people who are brought down for little of nothing. And there are so many people who are allowed to remain, who can go on Fifth Avenue and shoot and kill someone and nothing could happen. So the hypocrisy, in my impression, needs to stop.
What's your response?
Well, I agree with CK, and that was kind of the point that I'm making, which is that when we're talking about this issue of collateral consequences for serving time, I think you need to start at the bottom and work your way up instead of start at the top, work your way down. I think that when we're looking at, for example, what's going on with marijuana, where it's being decriminalized nationwide, and you still got folks sitting in prison for 10, 20 years for something that shouldn't have been illegal then, but we're not going back and fixing those things thereafter. You're still having people in dozens of states who do not have the right to vote because of felony disenfranchisement. You still have people who are not able to get apartments, live in certain communities, who will still have to check the box and for various daycares. You can't send your kids to if you have a felony conviction around the country. I think that we're going to start addressing the issue of collateral consequences for conviction. Then my point would be start at the bottom and work your way up. And we see far too often that we have politicians who either get in trouble or who get arrested, get convicted, and the first place they want to go when they get out is right back to the ballot box, because that's the easiest place to get employment at when when no one else is hiring. So I think that we have to stop this rotating door. There's plenty of new people to come in and build on the system. There's plenty of new voices, new younger people who can come in and fill those positions. But we have to start talking about the core people at the bottom who do not have that access, who do not have those advocates for them, and do not have those abilities, who are still suffering the collateral consequences for the war on crime and the war on drugs, the war on poverty, and everything else America has declared war on in the past 40 years.
Well, we need to get all people back in office like Rob Blagojevich, who would advocate for the least of these, because that's part of the problem. You don't have people like a Cory Bush, people will go and sleep on the Capitol steps and push and push and push and almost embarrass the nation, the administration, into a temporary eviction moratorium. Let me go to Jewel. Jewel, you're up in New York. How you doing, Jewel? Is Jewel still there? Hey, Jewel, what's
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. I don't want to say too much, and at any point, if I go off on a tangent, please stop me. Say, look, it's been hell for women, There go the governor over there with those beautiful, intelligent, educated women with degrees in the office, chasing them around, trying to make them look stupid. Gonna make a video, call the lady's name out. How heartless is that? You know what I mean? You did something. All right, you did something. You should be quiet. No. He goes, how about that? Those are white women he treated like that. So imagine a black woman that's over there screaming about somebody did them wrong in this type of matter. It's not a joke. It's not a joke.
Mm-hmm.
You understand? And I wish you hooked me up with a lawyer so I can hurt and try to do some litigation for something I really can't talk about on the phone. You understand? Because I was wrong over here in New York. And I've been begging for some justice and confidence. And I got the injuries. And I wondered what was taking so long. But when you got a chief at the helm that don't give a damn about women and give them help, you hear me now? Give them help. That's right. That's not no joke. Holy Spirit, they wouldn't have for my kids at the international airport. You hear me?
So, Jewel?
God, I'm alive.
So, Jewel, are you saying that you... No, hold on, Jewel. Are you saying that you need a lawyer?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
yes,
hold on. Jewel, hold on 1 second. Hold on.
Ma'am.
Because we have the former president of the National Bar Association who might be able to point you. Hold on, Jewel. She might be able to point you in a direction, maybe point you toward a lawyer. Zach, please put her on hold because we're going to speak with her during the break and make sure that she gets what she needs. If we can help you, we certainly will. Let me go to you. Is it Dan? Dan from Hoffman Estates? Dave, excuse me. Dave, I apologize. Dave, what's on your mind?
Santita, when you guys are talking on Blagojevich running again, possibly, and because of the prison, well, what about Marion Barry did, and also that John Bel Edwards out of Louisiana?
Mm-hmm.
Didn't they both do prison time and they ran again?
Yeah, but those are different laws in different states and the District of Columbia, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
For office,
So you're saying you're seeing the inconsistency here, right, Dave? Because this was not a law. This is the Senate passed a resolution. Be it resolved.
1 minute till break.
He can't run for office anymore. It's unbelievable. What is it? How do you think he should be allowed to run for office again, Dave?
Sure, like you said, he paid his time, and like you also say, these people that done their time, they should be able to vote.
He run for office.
They paid their debt to society,
Uh-huh.
so why can't they vote?
Okay, I think he's talking about being able to run for office, Dave. Do you think he should be able to run for office?
He said he could run for alderman or something like that, but he couldn't run. He said there was a couple of offices he could run for, president or something, but he couldn't run again as a governor or whatever.
So you think he ought to be able to run?
Yeah.
Okay.
Why not?
Look, Dave, I hear you. I agree with you.
Okay.
I agree with you. I love it. We're going to bring up Dr. Wolf in a hot second. I'm sure he'll touch upon this as well because he's in New York and he is living through what's happening in New York with Governor Cuomo. But we're talking about these eviction moratoriums or the eviction moratoria that was kind of sort of suspended, kind of sort of. A lot of people, 11 million people, are looking at homelessness. At least they have been. And while the White House has now reimposed the moratoria, the fact is it doesn't cover everybody. You still have a lot of people who are looking at homelessness, if not in the immediate future, in the next couple of months. What will that mean? What does that mean? And then we're still taking calls about Governor Rod Blagojevich. Should he be able to run again? Should he be able to run for office? I mean, any office. Okay. He's paid his debt to society. I think that he should be. I think that he should be. And I think I agree with you, Dwight McKee. I think it's mighty funny
1 minute till
that the
break.
people who stand for those, for the least of these, get the most punishment. When Governor George Ryan announced before the world that he was going to suspend the death penalty, friends, I was in New York at the time. I was talking to my friends, and we said, you know what, he's going to jail. I was black folks. Why do we say that? Because we know that the people who try to help us out, who try to help out the least of these, they pay the heaviest price. So you just let me know what you think. Let me know what you think. And what do you think about this, about the eviction moratorium? Congresswoman Ilhan Omar out of Minneapolis says, you know what? You should suspend, no one should be evicted during this pandemic. Until we get this right, let people stay in their homes. What about that? Going to talk with Dr. Maxwell from this wonderful panel about all of these issues on the Santita Jackson Show in just a few minutes. 773-763-9278, 773-763-9278. I want to hear from you. Back in just a minute. Santita Jackson Show.
Hi, everybody. This is Santita Jackson. Join me on the Santita Jackson Show, Mondays. Morning Drive on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk, where facts matter.
If you have unfiled taxes or are in
can
debt
you
to the
all bring that
IRS,
down?
this is important.
Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay. Are you all still there? CK?
I'm still here.
Okay.
I'm still here.
Because I want to connect you to Dr. Wolf right away.
Dr. Wolf.
Yeah,
Okay.
he'll be on. He's
you.
coming up right now. Yeah, because he's
I'll reach out
absolutely.
to him.
Oh, he's absolutely brilliant, and just one of the clearest thinking people I know.
Really, I'm going to be. I'm tying all this into the legal, what we're going to do legally. So,
okay.
Yeah, it would be. It would be great. I'm going to, because people are, I mean, Atlanta, I see new homelessness. We talk about this every day. When you see, you know, women, mostly I'm seeing women on the street that have, as I've seen twice, matching, you know, luggage that matches pots and pans, 3 or 4 shopping carts, not just one, you know, navigating the shopping cart in front of a Starbucks. You know, it's a different type of homelessness that we're seeing here. And it's tragic. Homelessness that's the one ill that we have not conquered in this country.
Well, if I get one more Uber ride in a luxury car.
Okay.
I mean, I'm struggling out here. Struggling.
Really struggling.
Struggling.
And by the way, something that's not discussed, there are a lot of companies that stopped paying their rent. I think you and I talked about this.
Yes, we did.
You know, they talked about this because they just basically said, you know, in these high-rise buildings in different cities that are virtually empty, the landlords just renegotiated with them because they figured, well, it's better to have somebody in the building, you know, tenant, than to have nobody, because that would. So, you know, a lot of people got deals, but the least of these are getting no deal.
They get no deal. They got to get out.
Right.
We have Dr. Wolf on the line.
And then let me say the flip side of the discussion. I don't know what's happening in some places, but in Atlanta, you go to the high-end malls, and you just see people forever shopping like no tomorrow. So the flip side of it is, as well, you know, a lot of people who haven't had to pay rent and have received stimulus checks and the like, just going to town and shopping like there's no tomorrow.
Well, girl, honey, everybody wants retail therapy, a little bit of retail relief. I'm not saying it's right.
Because we're all experiencing some form of PTSD.
Yes, come on now. Look, retail relief, retail therapy. I believe in it. Hallelujah. Dr. Max Wolf.
Hello.
Dr. Wolf, I want to introduce you, and I'm going to connect you all after the show to Attorney C.K. Hoffler. She's the former president of the National Bar Association, which is the oldest and largest black bar association in the world. More than 65,000 lawyers. She just left office last week, a couple weeks ago. She's also chair of Rainbow Push, but she's a very successful lawyer. And like you, she's francophone, so you all can speak in French, and the rest of us won't be able to understand you for the most part.
35 seconds.
But well, thank you so much, Zach. She was with you. So just
I
hold.
believe we've shared the virtual podium together on several previous occasions, but
Okay.
As well.
Absolutely, but I would look forward to. I'm doing a show that's going to focus on homelessness, and I'm also tying in what the legal community is doing because I was involved in some efforts prior to
5 seconds.
Well, hold
And I'm
on.
still involved in-
We're gonna come right to that.
Change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. Yes, it's Thursday, 7:33. Well, you know, like 7:30 at 7:30 a.m. Central Standard Time on the Santita Jackson Show. I have one of the most brilliant minds I know, Dr. Max Wolf, brilliant economist, who talks to us about he can talk about social cultural issues. He just can cover the waterfront, and we said we wanted to talk about what's happening with this moratorium, the eviction moratoria all over the country. That lapsed. Then it was kind of sort of reinstituted. What does all of this mean, everybody? And what does it mean that the Democrats scored a real estate cash bonanza before letting the eviction ban lapse? I mean, what about this? I mean, as houses, according to this Common Dreams report, as the homes of millions of renters across the U.S. were threatened this week by the White House's and Congress's refusal to extend the eviction moratorium put in place by the CDC, the Democrats' inaction was directly benefiting some of the party's biggest backers in the real estate industry. Can you believe it? What do you think about that, everybody? Democrats had gotten $1 million in cash before letting the eviction ban expire. How does that work? Of course, Rashida Tlaib, the congresswoman out of Detroit, said, "Give the money back. What are you all doing? What is that? Is that why this expired?" And of course, we're still taking your calls about Governor Rod Blagojevich. Some of you want to talk about Governor Cuomo, and some of you also want to just talk about the selective prosecution, or is it persecution, of different politicians, elected officials. It's interesting prosecuted. It's interesting who goes to jail. It's always the people who care about the least of these, or so it seems. And the people who protect the oligarchy, they're allowed to go on and do whatever it is that they want to do. Dr. Max Wolf, we got a tremendous people. All these people wanted to stay on and hear what you have to say today. What about this eviction moratorium? And there's just so much to talk about today. I don't even know where to begin.
Well, thanks for the kind words, and thanks for having me. Always a pleasure to join you on these Thursday mornings. I think on the eviction moratorium, it didn't get as much attention, either in the press or probably in the political discussion, as it should, just because we know that we have somewhere between 5 and 8 million households hanging in the balance. If the average household has about 2 to 3 residents, you're talking about quite an enormous number of folks, right? Not to mention that if the rationale for the moratorium on the eviction was about COVID, then putting more people and families out on the street to potentially get and disseminate the virus is also a community issue that affects everyone beyond just the folks who would be potentially put out. It also market. It also would affect policing and shelter crowding and food and soup kitchens and emergency shelter and social footprint here. I think what we kind of saw was very good tenants' rights. We have even poorer enforcement of the tenants' rights that we have. And so in the midst of the sort of COVID lockdowns, it became pretty clear, I think it's pretty defensible, the notion that if you're going to ask everyone to lock down and shelter in place, they literally have to have a place to shelter, right? And so there was an attempt to use the CDC's policy reasonably to solve a social problem. I think that was always controversial. There were people calling for this to expire almost from the moment that it was passed or shortly thereafter. And so it became controversial very quickly. And then the Democratic Party couldn't get enough enthusiasm from all of its membership and couldn't get any real support from the Republican Party to do what we should do, by the way, which is take over a sort of renters and tenants' rights agenda, separate and apart simply from COVID. Because whether we extend this now through October at the federal level, we should note too, by the way, that different states and localities have their own rules here, right? And so I know your listeners are a various bunch and they reside in different states and different cities. And so there are actually quite a welter of confusing local restrictions and rules too, not just the federal. And for some of us in the sort of more liberal states like me in New York, we were already extended beyond this extension anyway. So it really depends a bit on where you are, we should know. But we basically have the CDC extension and we haven't had the conversation about what are we going to do with all this back rent. And then the other thing to bring up, which I think is really important and doesn't get enough attention, is this program came late, the renters assistance, and it sort of came kind of post-Trump administration. It was quite poorly administered for a long time. And so landlords and renters have gotten almost none of the money distributed. So we know that what we thought we were doing to help people, we didn't really get the money to them, right? And so the other very good reason to extend, which is I think kind of how they got this through, the extension, is to say we need to extend the protections at least until we're able to distribute the payments. Because the folks who need and qualify for rental assistance, by and large, haven't gotten it. So we need a policy in place, but we need a policy that goes beyond COVID. Because tenants' rights, people being put out of their homes, was with us long before we knew what COVID was. And hopefully, in the future, when we're post-COVID, it will be with us as well.
How could Congress and the White House allow this moratorium to expire? I mean, when we find out that, the Democrats got a big real estate, got a big cache of cash, if you will, from the real estate industry. And then magically, we have this moratorium that lapses. I mean, it's just so socially, it's unsustainable to have any house people, to have anybody unhoused. But it's socially unsustainable to have this many unhoused people.
I think we're trending toward more unhoused people. So desirable and sustainable are not first cousins, right? So my point isn't that it's great to have a lot of homelessness and indigent folks, but the American home is one of these sort of physical representations of the middle class, and the sort of desperate circumstances of the American middle class are reflected in the home. And so a lot of middle-class housing is being bought en masse by big investment companies that will, in some cases, rent it back to people on a sort of rent-to-own. But in many, many cases, are just going to turn this into rentals. And, this idea that people have houses and that America has a big middle class is not something of God, despite the fact that lots of people think so. It's a concerted effort of lots of people to make laws and rules and businesses that respect and support that. So it's a higher tax rate, it's more regulation, it's a probably better place for labor in terms of its bargaining with its employers. And we have dismantled all the things. We took apart the machine that made middle class, and we somehow are shocked that we're not making middle class anymore, right? And it's not funny, but it's funny to do that, right? Like if you stop buying lemons, you stop buying sugar, and you stop having pitchers, and you stop buying water, then your lemonade production is going to come down a little bit. And I'm not sure that's rocket science. But so we have a housing market that was defined by this large middle class that was built by federal programs and high family wages and job security, right? And if you don't have the job security and the family wages and the federal government support programs aren't running as big as they once were, or maybe they're the things that still left, then the only way we've done anything to make houses affordable is by making interest rates super low. That makes the properties fairly expensive. and what it costs to own versus what it costs to rent has systematically moved against renters. And so we've seen rents are up 10% since COVID starts to begin. Right? So we have people probably being priced out of markets that they can't afford to pay for at all now on the edge of a foreclosure. And folks tend to think of the foreclosure as the end of the story. But if you've ever been with a community or been through this yourself, when you're foreclosed on one apartment, all that happens is you begin the desperate search for the next one. You don't revert to a state of nature and go live in the woods and, drop out of trees and, kill deer and eat it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Make open pit fires. You have to go live somewhere else where you're even more likely to be in substandard housing and to overpay for that substandard housing because you'll be seen as risky and it might be harder for you to get various assistance, deals, help, etc. Right? So we need an actual housing policy that helps us house more people more affordably if that's what we want, if that becomes the social decision. And that has to be something that's bigger than just the immediate COVID crisis. So clearly, there are special circumstances that deserve special attention around COVID.
Hey, everybody, what do you think we should be doing about the unhoused? As Congresswoman Cory Bush respectfully refers to the homeless. She said, no, they're unhoused. They're unhoused. Everybody has a home. We're on Earth. Earth is our home. We have to make a decision, a political decision about whether people deserve housing or not. Indeed, an unhoused Bill of Rights, among the things that this unhoused is permanently end the unhoused crisis by 2025 by drastically increasing the affordable housing stock, providing universal housing vouchers, and bolstering funding for federal housing programs, shelters, transitional and permanent housing programs, services, social services, and housing advocates. I mean, think about it, everybody. Most people who work in the United States of America who do not have high-end jobs cannot afford to rent an apartment in a city in the United States. They can't afford it. How are you supposed to work in a place where you can't live? I don't understand that. I want to open up the conversation to the people who are listening to you, Dr. Wolford. We also have some callers. I mean, you say that this is a political decision. I'm sorry.
We have these rules of thumb, by the way. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it might be interesting for people to note. A lot of people are housing for it, don't realize it. Or it's not like you get a letter like, hello and congratulations, Tom, welcome to the housing board, right? So people aren't notified. But generally, if you spend more than 25 to 30% of your income on housing, you're under some pretty heavy housing stress. The way we usually look at it, and if it's anywhere near 40% plus, you're house poor. In other words, the cost of living indoors, being sheltered or housed, or whatever term you choose here, is debilitating your overall financial resilience to a point where you're at risk. It also means that if you have even a short-term loss of income or an unexpected meaningful expense, which would historically largely be around medical expenses, car accidents, divorce, and things like that, then you're at a heightened risk of becoming chronically housing insecure. And so it isn't all just sort of crazy people and drug addicts who decide they would love to live under the subway overhead or whatever it is. There's a process here that is home.
Everybody,
or houselessness or whatever you want to call it.
Now, Attorney C.K. Hoffley wanted to hold on because she wanted to speak with you, of course, offline, but she also wanted to speak with you because, Attorney C.K. Hoffley, why don't you react to what you've been hearing Dr. Wolf say?
Well, I agree with Dr. Wolf is saying. I think we are entering into a housing crisis of significant magnitude, and we've got to do something about it because it's right now it's the least of these that are impacted initially, but it's going to filter up, and it will impact everyone. Because just think about it: if you are homeless, how can your kids go to school? How you're able to secure their education? And if kids are not in school, then that's going to cause a problem really in the streets for everyone. But the most significant problem is our kids are not being educated. Because if you're homeless, you don't have access to the internet. You don't have access to any of the typical standard things that you would need to have access to in order for your children to be successful. And so then we're going to have yet another year of children that will not be successful. And that's problematic as well. So I think that, and then further, just from a society standpoint, it's awful when you have homelessness at levels. Many people are in the market. The unemployment, if people are homeless, then they can't secure jobs. And it's a vicious cycle. So the potential employers that could help people, they need to have people that address where they can, send a paycheck to, or you can't, if you're homeless, you don't have access to, water supplies, suits to wear, or to clean clothes, have the money. So even if people wanted to, from an employment standpoint, help the masses of people that will be homeless, it's going to be very difficult. But I also want to say, there's this moratorium also applied to corporations. When COVID happened, a lot of businesses that were renting space in these high-rise apartment buildings and the like stopped paying rent. A lot of businesses. And maybe they could have afforded to pay rent, but they stopped because of the moratorium. And the landlord simply negotiated with the businesses better deal. Because, of course, the businesses were hurting, but businesses weren't on the verge of being homeless like people were being homeless. So when landlords negotiate, they will negotiate. But when it comes to the least of these, there is no negotiation. So the government does need to step in, because I think much of the COVID problem was handled from its by our government. And they're trying to clean it up. They've done, I think, a yeoman's effort. We have so much further to go and to be here to stay for a little bit. So we've got to address these issues squarely. People are being arrested every day so that we could lift this moratorium, so that people would be able to, impose a moratorium so that people would be able to get a break. And I think it's just going to really impact our society in significant ways. And the legal aspects will continue to evolve. And at the end of the day, we're going to see greater incarcerations, and we're going to see our communities suffer. Mm-hmm. And when one community suffers, all communities suffer. I hope that people aren't looking at this as a low-income issue, as those over there, because it's impacting every single person. And the legal system, you will see this by the number of cases and what's happening in our communities, in high-end communities, as a result of the homelessness that will occur, because people will be desperate.
Absolutely.
Make you feed your children and not you do desperate things.
Well, Dr. Wolf, increasingly. Please, Dr. Wolf.
Look, we don't have new numbers because the federal government hasn't been always great at keeping up.
Oh, hold on 1 second. I need you all to raise the volume on Dr. Wolf, please. Dr. Wolf?
Okay. Yeah, I can raise my volume as well.
Okay, that would be great.
Okay. So look, I think part of we don't have the newest numbers, which might be helpful in these contexts, but we know that as of the last year, the government collected data. So that's 2017. We had 1.6 million homeless school kids. So we actually had a problem with homeless kids and their ability to sort of be schooled and be included in whatever opportunities there are for them, or before COVID, right? We also know that this is substantially going to worsen, especially if we have a wave of evictions, and we've had a lot of dislocation for these kids, because if you're homeless and relying on school and then school is closed or virtual only, then you're relying on a non-existent provision, right? So part of this was also to help people hold on to what they have as they lose a lot, supplemental nutrition programs, the school programs, et cetera, for the kids, and other outreach programs for parents. The other thing is that we are still in the midst of a serious crisis, more high levels of infection. Does create a worse COVID problem. The other thing is that a housing problem is like COVID. It's exactly the kind of problem that we historically solve very poorly in the U.S. We can do it. We hopefully will do it, but we don't have a great history, so we have to be careful there. And that is, when we are profoundly interdependent, when our success and our health is really a direct outcome of the success and health of other people, we've tended to underperform. We like the idea that it's everyone's up to their own sort of devices and their own skills, and that's all that they need. And with COVID, it's your cough that makes me infected. It's my cough that makes you infected, right? And with homelessness, the crime, the disease, the crowding hits all kinds of people. And the best example we have is, in many ways, the two wealthiest cities in America and New York are at crux of homelessness. And you can't walk down our streets, even in our very affluent and well-positioned neighborhoods and areas, without seeing a sort of human crisis and tragedy on display of mental health care issues and healthcare issues and house and homelessness issues.
Everybody taking your calls. I think it is Patrick. You've been waiting for some time. Patrick, what's on your mind?
Oh, hi, Santita.
Hey.
Santita. You're talking about homelessness. Just the other day, I was on some kind of it was a YouTube comments, and I'd like to see Jimmy Carter talk with Biden. Had humanity, a large-scale, nationwide government program coupled with building co-op businesses. I mean, we could end the homelessness and solve the immigration crisis at the same time. As the virus goes, I don't think we're really serious about it when we're not giving others the patent. Because if, even our enemies, the worst of our enemies, if they had it, eventually it's going to come back around to us. And they're telling us now we got boosters that we might need to take, and then they don't want to use those yet because to other people. But this is about money and power. And if you actually look at it, then we're in the wrong and not getting it out and letting other countries who have the capacity to make these vaccines. I hear people like Bill Gates advocating not to do it. I have no idea why. I do know. I mean, that it's about money and power. Biden was just at the cusp of doing it. I'm not really sure if he did. Release those and let this actually be taken care of. We're sitting here talking about masks and some kind of long run when we're like knee reaction. And in the beginning of all this, you saw civilized countries up to upwards of 90% of their paycheck they're being paid, so they didn't have to worry about where the next. From here in the United States, we have thousands of cars lined up for food. We've never seen that in my lifetime. You didn't see. I mean, you had third world countries that were terrible in the first. Of course, this just made it even worse. These other countries that did take care of it, they made sure that the businesses didn't permanently close. Their economy had a little blip.
So, Patrick, stay right there. These folks, Duff, he is sounding like you. Why don't you react to that in these last 2 minutes?
Well, yes, my condolences. I'm sure it'll be passing condition for him. Look, I think most major decisions are about money and power. So I think we agree with that from a high level on a principle. I think I think these are opportunities to bigger problems. So in other words, we are sorely in need of a healthcare plan, right? If you have a healthcare plan and infrastructure and people trust and have a relationship getting healthcare from state agencies or a fixed agency, it's much easier for them to go and get it. And when the studies are finished, I know they've been started, folks who are having trouble or less likely to get vaccinated are also folks who are routinely left behind and underserved their system. So it's probably not an accident. Likewise, folks who are having the hardest problem getting replacement income or access to replacement income through government services or new jobs, and or getting access to help to stay in their homes and get better assistance, even when assistance has been provided to stay in their apartments or homes, too. So it's the chronically underserved that are underserved here, too. The one thing I would say in defense of the Biden administration is they did come into this very late in the crisis. faith kind of extension of priorities, which we did see in the Obama administration, which was a notion that the Republican will sort of basically gridlock this law and then will run against the gridlock, leaving various different groups in the Democratic Party to turn on each other, pointed about, often for good reason, about what's not delivered. I do think it's a bit dangerous to do that, only because it out of the frying pan into the fire. Mm-hmm. But I do understand
1 minute
saying, and clearly the responses have been consistently several days late, several dollars short, and what is an unambiguous and ongoing health emergency.
Everybody, I'm going to stay here on the Santita Jackson and Friends page for just a few minutes to get some closing thoughts from Dr. Wolf and from Attorney C.K. Hoffler, and of course, your biggest fan. Well, next to me, of course. It's your fan club, Dr. Wolf. We've got Dr. D, Dwight McKee, sitting by, listening to you, and of course, Robert Patillo. Stay right here, everybody, on the Santita Jackson and Friends page as we close out this discussion about politics, about being unhoused, about being homeless. No one should be homeless. My pastor, the Reverend Clay Evans, our pastor, Dwight McKee, he said, "I've never seen God make a mouth he couldn't feed." There is space in this world for everybody. God will supply your every need, not your every greed. Reverend Otis Moss Jr. told me that. Got too many greedy people, too many needy people. That's not right. We got to get the balance right if we're going to proceed. Perfect union. I'm Santita Jackson. Can't wait to be with you tomorrow, God willing. I love you. Some thoughts from these wonderful people.
Live performances,
You are the volume of the radio station. Thank you so much. Dr.
Yes, I am.
Dwight McKee?
Yes, I am.
Oh, Robert Patillo?
Patillo left.
Okay, C.K. Hoffler?
C.K. Hoffler left as well.
Okay, well, I'm going to connect. C.K. wants to connect with you, Dr. Wolf. Why don't you react to what you heard Dr. Wolf say? Of course, thank you so much. Why don't you react to what you heard Dr. Wolf say to Dwight McKee?
Well, I think he's basically right on, and I'd add a caveat to that. I really think it's a plan and a plot to drive those low earners back into that job market where they have no leverage. Is once you lose your home, you really lose your leverage. And because so many people, particularly who are in the hospitality industry, the waiters, those who, work for the hotel industry, people who had these commission jobs, who life had decided not to go back into that part of the workplace. And they are part of what they call the essential workers. And they needed them back into the marketplace. So I think that part of this was intentional, so that people in their desperation would take anything that's available. People would rather, work in a low wage job than to starve to death or be homeless. It all sounds a little conspiratorial and suspect to me.
Sure, I don't know if it's a conspiracy or just people being opportunistic when someone else is down on their luck. But look, I think I might have a less optimistic view of it than you in a way, which is I think that the cutting off of the flow of immigrants into the country and the nasty anti-immigrant rhetoric and heavy deportation might have lowered some of the leverage in the lower skilled portions of the job market. As well, there might have been a loss of some leverage because families are facing a crisis, and we can see this crisis really distinctly in the gender balance of who's out of the labor force, which is with schools and camps and childcare unavailable and or dangerous, right? Because also having your elderly relatives take care of unvaccinated young kids who want to go outside and play with their friends has other risks now that it might not. We have a crisis of people who are not coming back to the workforce. And because we don't care and we don't study it, we are hoping for stick as the motivation for the lower classes and carrot as the motivation for the upper classes. The notion is just force these people back to work. But if you might kill them at work, or they might bring home something that kills their kids or their parents, and they have no child care arrangements, I'm not sure you're in the wage standoff that people think you're in with a lot of people. I think people are making their choice in the minds of social theorists only. They're surviving. And going to a job where they don't care, where they risked your life, or maybe got you sick, where there aren't many masks, or they're old and crappy, where you might come home to a kid or an elderly relative who's all the more likely to be living with you in fairly crowded quarters right now, and or have to leave the kid or elderly person who cannot function on their own in order to get a job that pays you so little that you're continuing in poverty, and you may be worse off if you lose some government benefit by having the job. I think we've reached the crack up top of that arrangement, and I think either we're going to have an even harder, harsher reality for lower income people, which is certainly the agenda for some folks, or we're going to have a pushback, and that's the politics of this moment. The politics of this moment are we going to go back to trying to do some of the things that built some level of dignity for working people and some level of the middle class, and there's a constituency pushing that, or are we going to go kind of full harsh, fully harsh, unregulated, unintervened market? And that is the $24,000 question. And that question is now the big question in COVID, in healthcare, in eviction moratoriums, and minimum wage, in, educational spending and infrastructure and what we define as infrastructure, right? Are we going to try to go back to this big upward wealth redistribution period, basically call it 1980 to 2020 or somewhere thereabouts? Or are we going to go kind of back toward what we were like as a nation from the 40s to the 70s or 80s, or at least in that direction? Obviously, the future is never the past, and it's always importantly different. But I think we're at one of those like 1980 style crossroads here.
Was that the governor of Nevada who looked at the suffering and the pain and even the death and say, well, that's kind of the cost of doing business? His attitude was, yeah, I know you'll lose some.
Degree of heroism in our leadership. I mean, I think it still makes them friendlier than the governor of Florida, who feels like he can inherit the Trump electoral mantle by pretending there's no COVID a year and a half after the guy he's emulating stopped pulling off that particular stunt.
Yeah, and all heroes don't wear capes, but also all villains don't wear masks.
Exactly. Right? Yeah, my point is not that it's heroic to welcome the sacrifice of others if it helps people close to you or funding your political aspirations. I'm not quite that bent, or I think Santita wouldn't let me back on the show. At least not with such kind words. But no. I mean, look, I think a market economy often feels like a conspiracy against low-income people because it is. Right now, if they can
crisis And we're going to have to make a decision.
Can I add one little piece?
Oh, of course.
Which is, look, if some
bankers stole the money, they got their bonuses because they were too big to fail. And the little bitty people who are in the process of losing their houses, as they were at that same time when they didn't get any of the TARP money, they run the risk of being homeless because they are too small to succeed. And so it's based on who's in charge and who's controlling the purse strings.
Or especially in the Citizens United world, which we now live in, poor people break the law. Rich people buy the law. Most likely to have to.
You'll see it, Doc.
Well, now there. And that's a wrap, kids. I don't know what else you say behind that. That is, poor people break the law.
It doesn't have to be that way.
Have to.
Always that way.
You can drop the mic on that, Dr. Wolf.
But it is that way. All these unconvicted felons walk around out here. Come on. You know, I mean,
there's only 100. If you're a convicted felon, some people have to find other ways.
Ouch. Ow, ow. Okay, well, everyone.
It's an old joke. It's not mine.
Oh.
My joke. I do think it's funny. But.
Oh, my goodness. Well, you know, everybody, I love you. I'm so glad that you all were with us today. Of course, Lord willing, we will have another show today. I hope that it was compelling. I hope that you were well served by what you heard. I hope that you'll think about housing. I love you. See you, everybody. See you tomorrow on the Santita Jackson Show.